Hello, everybody. Welcome to our April edition of the Inner Circle Workshop. I'm Matt Stahl,
I'm
along
Darren.
with Darren Lepak. So Darren's our special guest today. And as you've probably noticed, those of you that attend regularly, Brad is not joining us. So I'm going to be hosting today. And Darren, one of our very own advisors, is going to be joining us. And we're super excited. So
looking forward to it.
I say that all the time. I am sincerely excited about stuff when I say that. But all right, guys. So today our topic is charitable giving. We covered the same topic about a year ago. It's a good time with tax time rolling around and to start thinking about not only 2022 when we're doing our taxes, but thinking about how we're going to plan out the rest of 2023. So that's our subject today. As always, just for those of you that are joining us for the first time, there's a chat box. If you all could we're going to do something a little different with the chat box today. So what we want you to do, there's a chat box in the lower part of the screen. I want you to click on that. And rather than just saying hi, today, we want you to tell us, with spring coming and then leaving here in Minnesota, and then hopefully coming back again, for those of you that are in Minnesota or not, what's the first thing that you're most excited about to do outside that's spring themed? So if you drop that in the chat box, just so we know that we're all communicating, that would be great. Put some thought to that and drop that in there. We'll watch them as they're coming through here.
Personally, I think it's a good time to talk about charitable giving because we've been dealing with 9 months of winter.
Right.
So we went straight from 9 months of frigid cold here to instantly allergies and sinuses, and everything's just blooming and going right into summer. So I think a lot of people that I've been talking to are just excited to be outside and looking forward to diving into a lot of topics today that talk about charitable giving and helping others.
There we go.
It'll be fun today.
All right, there we go. It looks like chat was disabled. That's why we test it. So if you give it a shot again, that would be great. Everyone. There we go. Working now. Perfect. So go ahead and drop your favorite spring activity in there if you would. It should be working for everybody. There we go.
Yep.
Yes. Walking outside without a coat, looking at flowers, living in South Florida, so always outside.
Yeah.
Hey, way to rub it in.
Come on now.
Yeah. Biking outdoors. All right. Love it. Awesome. So our housekeeping, we're going to go through our normal housekeeping. So today is what we're covering today, but then also what's coming up in the future. So our next Inner Circle events and some other events we have going on internally over the next handful of months. Before we do that, we each month also select a new social media follower that's going to receive a $100 Amazon gift card, and that is Deb Hand. So Deb, congratulations. Thanks for following us. For those of you that are not yet following us, go check us out on Facebook, LinkedIn, all the good stuff, and go ahead and follow for a chance to be included in that as well.
Don, I love your comment. Power washing everything in my way.
That's great.
Everything is getting cleaned.
All right, so I'm going to share our screen and go through our website and cover what we have coming up as far as upcoming activities. So if you haven't been out here lately, this may look a little bit different. Our website is constantly evolving and under construction to be themed with our process. So talking about our retirement renovation process, what I want to focus on today is going to be the education and the events coming up. So if you don't know, education is something that's very important to us. And Brad, one of our founders, that's really a passion of his. That's why I asked Darren to join us today as well. Also an outstanding educator and has a passion for speaking with people and joining people in that education. So there's a handful of different resources that we have down here. So we have our blog. I would encourage you to check that out. So our very own Ashley has some really unique interest as far as I think she did the best local cheeseburgers.
Yeah.
So she has some very unique expertise. So I'd encourage you to check out the blog, not only for financially related pieces, but also just some fun stuff included in there as well. So we have our blog, the podcast. So we do launch that semi-monthly. I'd encourage you to go out and follow that as well. Brad and I host that podcast and some really exciting topics we dig into there. We also have our events specifically. So I'm going to jump in here. So where we're at today, our inner circle workshop. So these are folks that we run into that are part of our inner circle, part of our Fiat family that we invite. So I'm just going to click in here, and this is what we're talking about today. So charitable giving, planning for generosity. What we have coming up in May is hidden fees and expenses. So this is a question we get often, and it's something that we enjoy digging into because unfortunately, that's not always something that's brought forth and talked about in a real transparent way. And it's something that we like to just get out there. So digging into that and exploring all the different expenses and fees that can be associated when it comes to investing.
I had a great line, and I've been sharing it every day, but actually a family I work with, they shared here, and again, maybe some of you remember this, but we actually had an event where we had a bunch of people together, and a line that was used was, in today's day and age, transparency and honesty is the most cutting edge tool you can have. So I've stole that, and I've been using that in every conversation I have, but I just think it's so critical. It's like in today's world, understanding how things work in full transparency is just key to you having confidence to be able to do what you do best, right? Which is retire and have some fun.
You borrowed it. You didn't steal it. Right?
Borrowed it.
There's
the compliance side.
There you go. Next month, the following month, we'll be talking about Social Security. So lots of moving parts within Social Security, especially as you're transitioning from those working years into retirement. So we're going to dig into some of the different moving parts and some of the different things we think about as we're making that transition, whether that's happening in a year, 5 years, or you're already in that phase. So what else? Anything? We have happy hours coming up. So I'm going to click back here with it warming up here in Minnesota. For those of you that are close or somewhat local, we do host happy hours on our beautiful deck.
It's open
that I can see out here with the sunshine. For those of you in Florida, it's deck season all year round, but we do have one coming up in May. So that's Thursday, May 18th, and then Thursday, June 22nd. So we have a lot of fun with those. We have a themed drink for Fiat Wealth Management that some of you actually helped come up with and voted on. So those have been a ton of fun. We encourage you to come out and join us. If you're local, or if you're not, then
feel free to
come
fly
visit,
in.
right? Yeah. So I believe that's it for housekeeping. Darren, anything else that I'm leaving out?
No, like I said, we try to keep it up to date so you can just, be aware of what we have going on and different events here. So I think there's some more good stuff coming that's not on the website that'll be happening this summer too. So we'll keep you posted.
Perfect. All right. My job is usually to share a dad joke at this point in time. I'm actually going to borrow I hosted this with our very own Scott Airy last year, and he told a joke that I thought was very fitting and very themed. So I'm going to borrow his joke from last year. I want to see if anybody remembers, and you may just know the answer to this, but along with our theme of today, why are crabs, the crabs that crawl around in the sea, why are they generally not very charitable? Any guesses? If you know the answer, go ahead and drop it in the chat box. I'm gonna give you just a few seconds. I know you're all waiting in anticipation. I got no answers. So, all right. So, because they are shellfish.
No, that's a good one. That's a good one.
All right.
Enough
of that.
Yeah, enough of that.
All right, guys. So this month, as we do every month, our format is we are going to do a fun and friendly quiz. So shortly, I'm going to launch a poll. We're going to give you a few minutes. There's going to be 8 to 10 questions in that poll. We're going to give you some time to go through and answer those, and then we're going to review those together. And that's going to be part of our education, is going through the answers and giving you some different commentary on that and piecing our education within those answers. So for those of you that are new, we call this a fun and friendly quiz for a reason. So it's not graded. There's no one's going to see your responses. We see them all as a group. So don't feel as though you're embarrassed about an answer or anything else. So I do get a bit competitive with this. I do want to stump you. And the reason for that is because that means you're learning. Okay. So it's not that I want you to feel bad. It's just that if you're getting stumped, it means that you learned something new. So, all right. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up our poll for today. Like I said, we'll give you a few minutes to go through this, and we will meet up shortly. Right. Looks like we have them rolling in. We're going to give it about another minute here and we'll get back together and review those answers. So finish up if you're not close already. All right, it looks like we have most of you have completed the responses. So I'm going to wrap up the poll here and we'll use those results to, if you are really close and not there, then drop something in the chat real quick. I'm going to give it about 20 more seconds and we will review all the answers. All right, looks like we have one more trickling in here. There's some longer questions this month as opposed to a little bit more thinking and turning of the wheels on the number stuff here. All right, I'm going to wrap up the poll. We are going to go through and review all the answers together. And I am going to take question one. So, all right, so question number one. Again, no one's going to see. All we are going to see is the cumulative response from everybody. So we will share that, but I'm not going to single anyone out and share your particular answers. Question number one. So Mary holds Apple stock that is currently worth $165 per share. She has chosen to donate 1,000 shares or $165,000 to her favorite nonprofit, the World Wildlife Fund. The cost basis, so the price she paid for those shares of Apple stock is $20,000. So that results in a capital gain of $145,000. If we were not talking about charitable giving and Mary had just decided to sell all that Apple stock, she's going to pay some sort of capital gain tax on that $145,000 capital gain. Because she has chosen to not sell the stock, but donate the stock to the World Wildlife Fund, who is responsible for the tax bill. So 30% of you selected Mary, 9% selected the World Wildlife Fund, 4% selected Apple, and 65% of you selected there is no tax bill. Congratulations, everyone. You are up 1. We have 0. So the correct answer is there is no tax bill. The majority of you selected that. That is a unique thing. If Mary were to have sold the Apple stock, then she would have paid the capital gain and then in turn donated the cash proceeds to the World Wildlife Fund. There would be a capital gain tax on that. So this is a very unique, I wouldn't say it's a loophole, but it's a very unique strategy that can be a kind of a win-win scenario when it comes to Mary and the World Wildlife Fund actually receiving more funds from that.
Yeah.
So
I get the question a lot too, Matt. I'm sure you do too, but just gifting stock to kids, this is similar. I know we have a question in here coming up that talks about that and what you can gift to children, but I get questions all the time of people saying, hey, I'm a grandparent, I want to gift stock to my grandkids, and a similar rule kind of applies. Now you got to be careful. There's a couple different bases you have to track, but same kind of thing. I mean, we've got families that'll give stock to their grandkids or their kids, without paying that capital gain bill and kind of transfer that over. So a lot of people think of gifting or charitable gifting has to be cash, and it doesn't. It can be actual stock inside your investment accounts.
Yeah, good point.
So
excellent. All right, let's
perfect.
Move on to question number 2.
Yeah, I'll take number 2. Daniel and Derek are both retired and they're reaching age 70, and they do not plan on spending their RMDs once they get there. Under the new Secure Act 2.0, the maximum amount they're able to use and essentially use a qualified charitable distribution, that's QCD. For those of you that have worked with us, you've heard about that, but how much can they send using a QCD per person? So again, 30% said 50,000, 35% send 100, and the other 35% said depends on their adjusted gross income. Nobody answered 200,000. The correct answer is 100,000 per person. So something interesting that's changed, the Secure Act originally passed back in 2019. They passed these bills in between Christmas and New Year's. I think it's because we're not paying attention. But the first Secure Act passed, the second Secure Act passed just this past Christmas and New Year's. And it actually changed that qualified charitable distribution to 100,000 per person, right? So if you have at the end of the year, you don't think you're going to use your required minimum distribution and you want to feel good about it and benefit yourself from a tax perspective, QCDs can be a really cool tool that ultimately a married couple could send $200,000 to a charity without getting hit or anyone paying those taxes. So one thing that's different too, that was added this past Christmas and New Year's with the new act, they're going to start indexing that for inflation. So we should see 100,000, kind of that limit per person, start to increase year after year, which is a really cool thing. So
that seems to be a theme where you see a lot of these rules that were put in place years ago, and there was no inflation adjustment over time. Yeah. So you run into a scenario where something that made sense back in the 80s suddenly doesn't make so much sense these days. Yeah. The whole required minimum distribution piece, I feel like we've run into it a lot in that we'll a pretty typical scenario is when we run into, I'm just going to use a couple as an example. It can be a single person, it can be a couple, but if you run into a couple that's been working and saving for years and raising a family, and they get to a certain point where they have this big chunk of money that's in qualified plans. So it's in 401ks or it's in an IRA that they had rolled over because they were doing what they're supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. Putting in money into a 401k, that was the right thing to do. So getting a tax break now, I'm not thinking about it, and I'm kind of putting off this tax bill for a long ways down the road. So a theme we would see is, folks that, the RMD age has changed over the past handful of years significantly compared to the history before that. And so that's been really interesting, but we'd run into a scenario where from a tax perspective, that ends up being, for a lot of people, one of their bigger expenses in retirement. So when we transition from getting a paycheck and withholding taxes to suddenly that being all on our shoulders and us figuring out based on our income streams was coming from where, what is our tax bill? That's a pretty significant change. And we'd run into that over and over, where if someone were to retire in their early 60s to mid 60s, RMDs can kind of sneak up on you if it's not something you're aware of. Yeah. So at a certain age, required minimum distributions kick in. That's different for the year that you're born in. That's not the workshop we're doing today, but the really unique thing, and I don't believe this has been changed, but the table to decide what your RMDs are based on how long you live, I believe it was around age 106, where if I had saved up, say I had $2 million in an IRA, if I reached the age of, I believe it was 106, one of you is probably going to correct me on this, I actually have to take out 50% of my IRA and pay tax on that entire withdrawal. So that required minimum distribution. So we run into that scenario a lot. I feel like where you've become accustomed to this lifestyle, a lot of people may not want to spend the required minimum distribution. So that the QCD, or the qualified charitable distribution, has proved to be a really, really powerful tool in the tax planning side of things. Yeah. So, and obviously at the same time, the charitable aspect of that as well.
Yeah. I always joke with people early on in retirement, you need to be selfish, right? You have to worry about what you want and how you want to do it with who you're going to do it with. But everyone hits a point where all of a sudden it's like, hey, we don't need this money, right? We're not going to spend this money. So qualified charitable distributions start to come up when people go, look, I need to do some of this tax planning for myself, but also it's important to me now that I start helping others, right? And it's a great tool it's going to change more, I would assume. Obviously, the $100,000 limit's going to start to go up, but I'm sure we'll see over the next few years more changes to qualified charitable distributions. So,
excellent. All right. So, how are we gonna score that?
that's a tough one. That's a tough one because basically answer number 4 was like, it depends.
Half
Yeah,
and
it's a
half.
tough one.
We had 35%.
Yeah, we'll take 0.5.
We'll give it to you guys. You're up 2, we're down 0. You all are up 2, we're at 0. All right. Here's my chance. So question number 3. Bob knows he would like to contribute $250,000 of his nest egg to charitable causes. So in this particular example, Bob has 4 different causes that he has in mind that are important to him. He decides upon some research and some advice to open what's called a donor advised fund. And he's going to provide grants to those 4 charitable causes over time from this account. Although he's not going to grant all $250,000 immediately to those 4 different charitable causes, how much is he going to be able to deduct from his income the year that donor advised fund was established? All right, so yes, I love it when we have answers spread out because that means that we had to think a little bit on it. So 35% of you selected $250,000, the full value of what was contributed to that donor advised fund. 0 selected 0. So the 26% of you said it depends on Bob's income in that year. And 39% say it depends on how much is granted to the charitable causes in that year. Nice job, everybody. The correct answer is the third option. It depends on Bob's income in that year. So let's back up just a little bit. Donor advised funds, I feel like just from observing over the past, it feels like over the past 5 years, those have, the awareness has kind of gone through the roof. So, and it is one of the donor advised fund is the most popular charitable giving vehicle as of 2022. So you're starting to hear about it more often. So we've probably heard about family foundations. That was traditionally, what people would do if a family was looking at this and they had several different charitable causes they're interested in. So the donor advised fund, I'm oversimplifying this a whole lot, but it's kind of a plug and play family foundation where you don't have quite as much control, but there's a lot less time and resources that goes into that. So private foundation, you have to, you have to hire all the expertise to administer that, the tax side of things, the legal side of things, lots of time and resources. The donor advised fund, you're going to have a little bit less control. However, you're not dealing with a lot of the complexity. There's a whole lot of different differences. The easiest way to think about this, let's say that I typically donate $3,000 a month to a charitable cause. Okay, so over the course of a year, that's $36,000. Let's take this to a real world scenario where say that in 2024, I have a one-time event where my income is going to jump significantly. And what the donor advised fund would allow me to do from a tax perspective is I can still plan to donate $3,000 per month or give $3,000 per month over the next 5 years. But I can take that $180,000 and lump it all into 1 year. Now, the caveat is, and going back to the answer here, is it's going to be based on what your adjusted gross income is. Okay, so there's 2 different numbers. If I'm donating cash and it's not been an appreciated asset, then it's 60% of my adjusted gross income I can deduct in that particular year. If it is appreciated stock or an appreciated asset, then it's actually 30% of my adjusted gross income. So that's the correct answer is it depends on the income in that year. So
yeah, I think this comes up a lot too with like qualified charitable distributions of just another tool that people hear of. You know, if you hop online and you search on how to give away money or what the tools are, usually the QCD and the DAF, the donor advised fund, they pop up right next to each other. But from a planning perspective, those of you that, you know, work with us, you probably maybe started to hear about this if you're starting to give dollars away. But you made a really good point. I mean, timing it around big events in your life where your taxable income is going to go way up. You know, I sometimes, for the business owners on the visit today, it's like business owners sometimes will take big depreciation in a year where they know they're going to have a lot of taxable income. Same thing here, but you're doing it for your family, right? Where you could say, hey, I know I'm going to give this money away. Now, once you pledge it, you can't go back and say, hey, I've changed my mind after I took the deduction, but it's a great tool if you time that out with your individual situation to just take advantage of you giving money away. So it's a popular tool.
Excellent. All right. Let's move on to question number 4.
Question number 4. This is back again to the Secure Act 2.0. But with the Secure Act 2.0, they now offered one-time transfer options of $50,000 per person, so $100,000 married filing joint, to a tool like a charitable remainder trust. One key point to be aware of is how much of that asset must go to the charity. So this is a concept that we get a lot of questions on, but ultimately charitable remainder trust and charitable annuity trusts are tools where you can, same concept, say, hey, I'm going to give this money away. The question is if you put the money in that account, right, or in that trust to say, I'm giving this away, how much of it actually has to go to that charity, right, that you're giving it to? So that's essentially where the question came up. 4% of you said 5%, 39 said 10%, 43 said 12.5%, and 17% 70.5. I threw that in because that's the old RMDH number. So Koch, some of you, the correct answer is 10%. So 39% of you answered that correctly. Remember, this is a new tool. So again, if you haven't spent a lot of time, I know we've written a few blogs and sent some emails out on Secure Act 2.0 and some of the changes, but this is a new thing that they added. So 2 questions ago, we talked about $100,000 as a QCD. Right after that, one of the changes that they made was now they're allowing a married couple to say, hey, here's $100,000. You can actually put that in a charitable remainder trust or an annuity trust that pays you back a portion to yourself, but you're pledging again a piece of it to go to whatever charity that you had it set up with. So it's kind of an in the weeds type topic. And again, being brand new, I've got a lot of folks that are just saying, hey, what is that? Talk to me about that. It's not like, again, this is something that's been around for decades. It's a new change that we saw in just the last 6 months.
Excellent. I think so this is something that I experienced this personally, and through other experiences and having conversations, I know that at least some other people have the same experience. Whether it's a donor advised fund, where it's a charitable remainder trust, whether it's a irrevocable life insurance trust, there's all these different, just really interesting strategies and tools that are out there. Yeah. I once was an engineer, so I do at least like, to a degree, understanding how things work. Maybe not to the level of some other engineers, but so there's all these different interesting things, and I feel like I'd have these conversations over and over again where people would see something where they'd read it on in the Star Tribune or wherever it may be, and it's like, hey, this sounds really cool. Can you explain this to me? You go through and explain kind of how everything works and logistics of everything. However, the biggest obstacle that I've found is all the work that leads up to that. Okay, so oftentimes I had found it's not that we didn't put all these interesting strategies in place because we didn't understand how it worked on a spreadsheet. A lot of the time it was people hadn't done the pre-work to decide what they actually wanted. Yeah. And so when you think about this, a lot of these things we're talking about right now, when you think about a financial plan, this is like, I would say it's, step 8 out of 10. Okay. So we're never going to know which tools are going to make the most sense if you don't know what you want to accomplish. Yep. Right. So a perfect example of this is if, say, I'm talking to a couple and, we ask, it's pretty clear that they've put some thought into how much they want to spend, what their lifestyle is going to look like. And after running the numbers, they're not going to spend everything, even if they had a long-term care cost or whatever it may be. So that's step number one. A lot of people get hung up on that. It's figuring out, what do we want this to look like? How's it going to compare to where we were before? Next step is, do we have children? Do we have grandchildren? Do we have any younger people in our lives that that are important that we want to give money to? And some people don't want to, right? So I put that right up there with any charitable cause. But there it's, do we want to do that? Number one, why? And what are the parameters we want to put on that? So say that, fast forward and I'm 80 years old and I'm lucky enough to have grandchildren. And if I think about that, I don't want to give my grandchild a big chunk of money when they turn 18 and just have it be a free-for-all, right? At least not if they were like me when I was 18, not a good idea. So it's thinking about those parameters. What are the things that are important to us? And that's kind of taking 2 big steps back. Once we have that figured out, now we can start to plug in these different puzzle pieces of the tools that work. But I've found that that's really the biggest obstacle is kind of the pre-work. Yeah. So if there's, one thing I can leave you with today, if you're going down this path and you're starting to have the conversation with your advisor, is start to put some thought around those things.
Mm-hmm.
What are the values you want to instill? What's important to pass on? Now we can plug in the tools and everything with that, but it's meaningless until we know those things.
I get so often in, the classes that we teach and things, everyone wants to know what's the best. What's the best? Hey, I heard about this, and is that the best? I heard a trust is better than this, or this is what so-and-so did. And I think that's what I always come back to as well. I'll get a question around, a charitable remainder trust. But then as we start peeling back the layers, you kind of find out it's like, look, they haven't done really even the income planning for themselves or the investment structure or the tax planning. It's like, again, you're trying to look at it of saying, hey, I want to give all this money away, because that's really what you're doing, right? That's the topic of today, is giving money away. But if they haven't done that core work first, they just want to know what's best. And I don't know if it's to take it and tell someone else what's best, but all of these, that's such a good point. All of these tools, everything has pros and cons. It's just really family dependent on what you're trying to accomplish and where you're at and what stage of life you're in, right? Some people that are giving money away early on in retirement versus later, different tools start to work differently. So that's a great point.
All right, let's move on to, and I think the score is 2-2. So if you disagree with me, then go ahead and drop it in the chat, but I'm gonna run with that for now. All right, question number 5. This is a very straightforward question. Who made the largest charitable gift in 2022? So 39% of you selected Bill Gates, 26% of you selected Jeff Bezos, 22% selected Warren Buffett, and 17% selected Alice Clark. The correct answer is Bill Gates. So his charitable gift, it was just north of $5 billion. 5.15, I believe, somewhere in that range. And just to kind of give so the top 3 were Bill Gates at 5 billion, Elon Musk at around 2 billion, and Michael Bloomberg coming up in third around $1.7 billion. What I think is more interesting as you dig into that is the number's the number, right? That's a large number. That's excellent. It's more as you dig into it, what's the intention around the really interesting thing, I think, is if you look at how this list has evolved, look at it over a 10-year time frame, see who's consistently on that list and
who spikes for a year and
right. So
disappear.
And it's all great, but that, I think, when you peel the layers back and you dig into that, is really telling on who is intentional. And if you dig into, the different causes, I think that's the most fascinating piece of all this. Yeah. So, but you were correct. Bill Gates was the correct answer. So score is 3-2 to us. Yeah. Anything to add to?
No, I think I just looked up a couple of stats around it. And one interesting thing I found was, out of all the charitable giving that happens in this country, 80% of it is individuals, right? So it's folks giving their money away. It's only 20% of it's corporations, and yeah, I was thinking through the same thing. It's like, who has consistently given, and then, maybe it's the curious side of me, but I'm always wondering, like, who was the people that all of a sudden gave away a few $billions and we never saw them again on that list. You just wonder what was going on their balance sheet or what was going on in their business or their life that, or maybe it's their heart, right? They were just feeling really good one year, but typically it relates back to something financial, that they gave a big chunk of money away, and then, it's not something that's kind of a core belief of what they do. Next question kind of ties to this as well, but based on the national average, this I thought was interesting. Every time the S&P 500 drops 100 points, charitable giving drops by what amount? And this is averaged, and I found it in 2 studies. But 35% of you said 500 million, 26% said 1.6 million, 13 5.5, and 26% of you said 1.85 billion. The answer is actually D, 1.85 billion. What I thought was really, really interesting about this is, again, everyone wants to feel full in their hearts. They want to give money away, but once money starts to trickle down, it slows, which makes sense, right? But one thing, as I was kind of putting these together, I thought of is just the planning. So for those of you that have, worked with us for some time, you've heard about like now money, soon money, and later money, or that stay rich philosophy. And that's just one thing that kept coming up in my mind. It's like, we all want to give. 80% of what's given in this country is from people, right? Individuals. But when you really don't have a plan and the market is dictating how you behave, what your values are, I know you and Brad talk about that a lot. It was just really interesting to me. 1.85 billion stops as soon as the market takes a little bit of a hiccup or a dip. So again, there was just kind of a fun fact that I found a few different places, but it just makes me think back to the actual planning side. Just because the market's down doesn't mean we want to stop giving and stop planning, right? If you've got the right structure in place, like just because markets are down, you can still take advantage of that tax planning. I don't know if anything to add. I know it's just kind of a fun fact question.
Yeah, no, I think that, that list, that the overarching number had actually gone down. There's this list that's tracked at the top, charitable giving. It did actually go backwards in 2022. Yeah. If you've stayed tuned to anything that's gone on in any market or listened to any podcasts or anything, that 2022 was not a banner year for any, really any asset class when it comes to investing. So with very few exception. I guess the phrase that comes to me is just, often the way that I observe things is all the moving parts. How one thing over here affects something over here. And the phrase that pops up to me is like, we're all in this together. Mm-hmm. So, it's, we see charitable giving going up when we see the market going up, and it is another reminder of how interlinked all of us are. And yeah, that's what jumps out at me.
Yeah. Just a fun fact question. Kind of shocked.
Yes.
It's a lot.
All right. Question number 7. John and Sue have been fortunate in their financial life. So they're now in their late 70s, and along with their financial planner, they decided it makes sense to begin gifting to their 3 children. So they have 3 different children. Their children are all married, but don't yet have children. What is the maximum amount that John and Sue can gift without filing a gift tax return? I'm going to give this one to you because the wording there should be a further clarification on this. It should be, what can they give to each of those children maximum? So the correct answer as it's worded is actually not on here. So 17,000, 17% of you selected that, 4% selected 0, 39% selected 68,000, and 39% selected 34,000. So let's dig into this a little bit, because I feel like there's a lot of misconception around what this actually means. So often you'll hear you can gift, and the new number is 17,000 for 2023. It was 16,000 for 2022. So you can gift $17,000 without filing an IRS Form 709. That doesn't mean that I can't gift more than that. It just means I'm going to go file that gift tax form. Yeah. So file the 709. Now let's dig into this a little bit further. In this particular example, John and Sue, so they have one son named Mike. Okay, so Mike is married to Mary. So John and Sue, as a married couple, they can give 17,000 each. So 17,000 plus 17,000 is 34. They can give that to both Mike and his wife, Mary. Okay, so that's where the 68,000 number comes from. Again, this doesn't mean that they can't give more. This all that would happen is it's going to count against their lifetime exclusion. Now, this is where I think it gets really interesting. If we've had the conversation before about the estate planning piece, or we dug into that with you, some of this is probably going to sound familiar, but that as of this year, the annual lifetime exclusion is $12.92 million per person. So there's this ongoing calculation that's being kept track of over the course of my life. If I had never gifted at all, so say that my wife Katie and I, if we had never gifted any money at all, and we were to die with $24 million, and both of us die in a plane crash, there's not going to be an estate tax due for anything above that number. That's where the gifting plays into this. So there's this ongoing calculation that's running against that tally. Okay, so I can gift $200,000 in a year, but it's going to count against that $12.92 million. I can gift to my spouse as much as I want, so without incurring or accounting against that whatsoever. But it's in any charitable organization as well. But it's when it's gifting to another individual. Now, this is set to that $12.92 million as of right now is set to go to $6.8 million in 2026. What I want to pop a little question here. And if you know the answer to this, drop it in the chat. I don't know that Darren knows the answer to this either. So again, that $12.92 million, that's a big number. And when you look at it, that's the vast majority of the people in this country. They're not going to touch that. So I want to know if any of you know what that number was in the year 2009. So what was that lifetime exclusion? I'm going to give you a minute and drop it in the chat. If you get it correct, maybe
dinner, lunch, I don't know. Wash their cars for a week. I mean, I don't know how many people write that down their whiteboard since 2009.
So drop it in the chat if you know the answer to that. What was the annual lifetime exclusion in 2009?
That's a good one.
I'm only going to give you 10 seconds because I don't want people to go Google it. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. Gary, 1.5 million. So I have 1 million is what it was in 2009. So that is just an illustration of how that, that is over a decade ago, but that's a massive jump in that time frame. So this is just an illustration of how much policy can affect our financial plan when we're looking at all these different things. So if that were to drop back down to 1 million, that's going to affect a large swath of the country, of retirees. So massive difference there. So again, that's something where as we get into all the different moving parts, we'll see that one thing affects another. And that's something we're always keeping an eye on, but that's, a big piece of thinking about how this all works together.
Yeah. That's so common too, just the conversations you have. Everyone thinks you only can give 17,000 per year. So we get hung up on that number because that's what's on the spreadsheets. And when you Google it and you find these different websites, that's what you see. But you can give a lot more. I've got a lot of grandparents that want to gift to kids, so there's different ways to do that, whether they're paying for college directly using UTMA or UGMA accounts. I've got a family that matches dollar for dollar in a Roth IRA, which is a really cool idea to incentivize, right? Like the IRS incentivizes us to do things with tax credits. Same thing, like they're incentivizing their grandkids to save for their retirement and they'll match a percentage into a Roth. So you can gift a lot and you can be really creative, but I think just most people get hung up on what they see on the IRS's website of here's the number, but they don't have the context of what it actually means. Sake of time, we can hop to the next question. With the passing of the Secure Act 2.0, remember Christmas and New Year's, they now allow one-time transfers of 50,000. Remember from the previous question, per person. To which of the following financial tools? CRUT, CRAT, CGAs, or all of the above?
Are you speaking your own language over there?
Yeah, yeah.
Crack.
That's why I put some of the notes in there, because this is new concepts for a lot of people. But 13% said the charitable remainder trust. 4% of them said charitable remainder annuity trust. 13% charitable gift annuity. I know we're like crossing lines here and not sure what all of them mean. 70% said all of the above. You guys win that one. Yeah, it's all of the above. All of them work a little bit differently. We don't have time today to get into those, but I'd challenge you if this is something you're curious about. You're in a phase of life where what we're talking about today makes sense for you. Those are really cool tools. And the big thing is that this is brand new with the passing of Secure Act 2.0 as of just a few months ago. So they didn't allow this, but now as a married couple, you can give $100,000 and actually use it inside those trusts to pay you some income back. At the same time, give money away, right? So there's some cool tools that you have access to there.
Excellent. I want to get to the next question. It's the most,
Yeah.
It's a fun question on here. Again, I would just go back to taking it back to the initial step.
Yeah.
What do we want to make happen?
Yeah.
Yes, there's all these different things. They're going to continue evolving too. So it's never the same thing isn't going to work in 2 years that works today.
Yeah.
So just again, underlines the importance of either hiring a financial planner or doing a really good job of being your own.
Mhm.
I always say it takes the time, desire, discipline, and knowledge to succeed when it comes to managing your financial life. And keeping up on these sorts of things, that's a big piece of that.
Yeah, that's a prime example of the last, what we talked about, where people are like, what's better? Is this better than that? And it just depends on what you're trying to accomplish. That's a prime example where, if you don't have the experience or the exposure to some of these things, it's like you see these different acronyms and it's like, what is better? Well, it depends.
Right.
That's a prime example of that. Yeah.
Just because something makes sense today may not mean it still makes sense in
Yeah.
5 years. So I hate to break it to you all, but you're not off the hook when you don't create a financial plan once and you're done.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
So, all right, question number 9. We tried to throw a fun question in here. This is what is the name of Darren's dog?
So I'm curious because I do know some of you, but there's probably a lot of you that don't know me.
So
And I think
13% of you selected Mike, which I think it's hilarious when people use like very human names for dogs.
Steve. That's a good dog.
26% of you selected Molly, 17% selected Ruby, and 43% selected Huck, which is the correct answer.
Yeah, that's why I'm surprised. I'm like, many of them probably don't know who I am, but I don't know. Maybe they've been doing their research.
And what kind of dog is Huck?
He's an 80-some pound golden doodle. Yeah.
Large dog.
Yeah. Tiny little side story. His dad was 21 pounds. Mom was not more than 30.
Oh my God.
And they said he would be about 30. Yeah. We passed that at
Poor dog
we
size.
passed that pretty quick. And my wife Paige wanted she wanted a small lap dog. And now we have
You have a large lap dog.
85-pound ball of fun.
Excellent. One last thing I'd like to leave you all with. We are going to wrap up a bit early today, which is not typical. I'm actually kind of excited about that. We're not rushing at the very end. So going back to what I mentioned, the most important piece of all this is the thought process that goes into this. What are the values? If we don't know what those are, that's step 0, right? So what are the values to us as an individual, to us as a family? What do we want to instill beyond that? That's really going to form what our giving strategy is. And 2 really, really cool things that I've seen. Number 1 is creating a sort of family doctrine. And there's actually organizations that will help you do this, where it's a common, it's a group conversation where you form, what you believe to be your family doctrine. These are the values. This is what we believe in. And some of them even go as far as creating a family crest, some sort of physical representation of that. That's a really, really cool thing I've seen that has been extremely powerful. And again, everything else is formed around that. The second really, really cool experience I've had is just holding an informal family gathering. And being in this world for almost 20 years, I've been really surprised by the amount of by the lack of conversation, of transparency between
in the family.
Different generations.
Mhm.
And that a lot of times I've found it's not a values thing. It's just like, we didn't get around to it.
Yep.
It's also can be really uncomfortable. Like, who wants to talk about when we're gone? That's just not, you'd rather go, if you don't get to see your family very often, you want to go on a boating trip with them or something, right? But that's also one of the most beneficial things I've ever seen and had the privilege to be a part of, is facilitating a family meeting, where it's just getting everyone on the same page. It doesn't mean you have to have everything figured out. It's just getting the entire family in a room, sharing, this is our plan. Here's our plan for different contingencies, and then forming beyond that. Obviously, you're not going to do that with a 12, 10, and 8-year-old. I'm talking when the whole family's at a point of maturity where that makes sense. So those are two really, really interesting things I've seen that have been helpful in helping form steps 0, 1, 2 before we move on to all this technical side of things. So, there anything else to add?
No, I just think a lot of your peers, right, and everyone on the workshop today, I mean, everyone's got these questions. We run into it at the classes and just people we talk to every day. Everyone's thinking, and I think naturally people want to give, they want to help others. But it's that piece, just like your own financial planning. It's like the only way, for those of you that have worked with us for some time, it's like the only way you're going to come out the back end of it confident and clear of what you have to do and what you can do, right? Everyone wants to give money away, but the thought of doing it is sometimes terrifying. Like, am I okay? And am I okay to the point where I can give my money away to others? The only way to be confident and clear on doing that is to spend the time, get in the weeds, work through it, and build a plan around it. It's the same thing when many of you met us for the first time. It's like, look, we've got this pile of money. You're nervous, and not going to work on Monday terrifies you. But the only way we got there was spending 4 to 6 weeks, every single week, holding your feet to the fire, teaching you different things. But by the end of it, you left with the confidence to go, look, if I have a bad week, I'm not going back on Monday. It's the same thing when it comes to charitable giving. And it's the conversation that, like I said, everyone brings up. At some point in their life, they want to either give to their family or give to people around them. And I would just challenge you to have that conversation, think about it. And then if it's something that's important to you, just make sure it's part of your plan with your advisor.
Excellent. Well, with that, enjoy all your spring activities that are either already happening or soon to happen. I saw 74 in the forecast for Minnesota next week, so we're close. It'll snow.
It'll snow one more time.
We're close. Everyone, thanks so much for joining us. Again, please go to the website, check out our next upcoming workshops. Follow us on social media. Check out the podcast if you haven't already done so. And as always, we truly, truly enjoy this and love the education piece. So have an excellent day. Thank you.